Welcome to our 26th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1360, with a release and air date of Saturday, March 22, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
On the air around the world on the amateur radio bands, streaming on the internet, and carried on low-power FM broadcast stations nationwide, you're with This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the lead stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1360 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The Federal Communications Commission opens the comment period on deregulating everything. The ARRL is preparing to file comments on the delete FCC notice of proposed rule making. Democrats introduce legislation in Congress to prohibit the FCC from revoking licenses. The U.S. government shuts down most shortwave broadcasting, including The Voice of America, Radio Marti, and more. Jeffrey Stark steps down as one of the FCC commissioners. The African Telecommunications Union discusses expansion of amateur radio in Africa. Radio amateurs, students and scientists attend the 2025 HAM-SCI workshop. The 2025 ARRL Amateur Radio Open House event continues to grow. Young radio amateurs are preparing to attend the DX Youth Adventure. The long goodbye continues as NASA shuts down more instruments on the Voyager spacecrafts. The 2025 Dayton Hamvention Award winners are announced. We will tell you who they are. The 2025 ARRL Field Day theme and merchandise are now available. An amateur radio club in New York State is preparing to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Erie Canal. And a special event station will be running to celebrate American physician and researcher Dr. Jonas Salk. We will have all the details coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, Phi K6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio, returns to his ongoing Bald Yak project. This week in Part 11, he talks about the goo between the hardware and the software. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another new edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will sets the Wayback Machine for the mid-1920s, where, in a drama worthy of a Broadway play, amateurs were making progress taming the QRM problem. Sometimes a solution did not involve a new invention, or even technology at all. We will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air. Right now. Reporting from our windy headquarters studio just outside Albany, New York, this is W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting this week from my home QTH in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau here on the Space Coast of Florida, I'm Ed, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where the dogwoods are blooming, but yet there is still snow on the peaks of the Great Smoky Mountains. I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where we were treated with a dusting of snow for the first day of spring, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
Reporting from our news bureau in Lebanon, Tennessee, where we hit 80 degrees today, I'm Al Shepard, WK8W.
Here's a reminder that the annual Hamfest of the Shenango Valley Amateur Radio Club will be held next Saturday in Norwich, New York, starting at 7 a.m. It's at the St. Bartholomew's Church. We'll be tailgating there. Hope to see you. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, wishing Old Man Winter would just exit stage right.
FCC Chairman Brendan Carr is opening a new docket, in re delete, seeking comment on every rule, regulation, or guidance document that the FCC should eliminate for the purposes of alleviating unnecessary regulatory burdens. Among the criteria that Carr is seeking comments on are cost-benefit considerations, experience gained from the implementation of the rule, marketplace and technological changes, regulation as barrier to entry, changes in the broader regulatory context, changes in or other implications of the governing legal framework, and other considerations relevant to the retrospective review of Commission rules. Carr stated, under President Trump's leadership, the administration is unleashing a new wave of economic opportunity by ending the regulatory onslaught from Washington. For too long, administrative agencies have added new regulatory requirements in excess of their authority or kept lawful regulations in place long after their shelf life had expired. This only creates headwinds and slows down our country's innovators, entrepreneurs, and small businesses. The FCC is committed to ending all of the rules and regulations that are no longer necessary, and we welcome the public's participation and feedback throughout this process. The American people expect and deserve a government that will efficiently deliver great results. We are committed to doing exactly that at the FCC, Chairman Carr added. The Communications Act directs the FCC to regularly review its rules to identify and eliminate those that are unnecessary in light of current circumstances, recognizing that in addition to imposing unnecessary burdens, unnecessary rules may stand in the way of deployment, expansion, competition, and technological innovation in communications that the Commission is directed to advance. Government-wide administrative law requires review of rules to ensure that unnecessary or affirmatively detrimental rules are not retained. We encourage commenters to consider certain policy factors, as described below, and consistent with standards and objectives set forth in recent presidential orders, as well as statutory and regulatory retrospective review standards. We also invite more general comment on rules that should be considered for elimination on other grounds. Submissions should identify with as much detail and specificity as possible the rule or rules that the commenting party believes should be repealed or modified, and the rationale for their recommended action. Commenters whose comments raise issues related to other open commission dockets should file their comments in all relevant dockets.
In a public notice titled RE Delete, issued on March 12, 2025, the FCC is soliciting public input on any FCC rules in any service that members of the public believe should be deleted or modified for the purpose of alleviating unnecessary regulatory burdens. This is the latest in a series of similar proceedings going back to 1996, when the Communications Act was amended to require the FCC to periodically review its rules. ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, through its Executive Committee and FCC Council, is conducting a review of the provisions in Part 97 and other related rules that apply to radio amateurs. The ARRL is also soliciting feedback from its members. Rules identified as outmoded, obsolete, or that for the other reasons should be repealed or modified will be included in the ARRL's filing to be submitted no later than the FCC deadline of April 11, 2025. All filings must reference docket number 25-133. The deadline for filing reply comments is April 28, 2025. It is expected that the Commission will incorporate suggestions that it decided worthy of its consideration in a future notice of proposed rulemaking that could be issued later this year. There will then be an opportunity for public comment on the specific rules that the Commission proposes for deletion or modification. A PDF of the FCC public notice is available on the Commission webpage.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Radio World is reporting that Democrats have introduced legislation to prohibit the FCC from revoking broadcast licenses or taking action against companies based on viewpoints aired on their stations. The Broadcast Freedom and Independence Act states that the Commission is an independent agency and must not use its authority to execute politically motivated attacks. Democrats are worried that the Commission under Chairman Brendan Carr could target specific broadcasters based on the views they express. The three senators wrote to Carr and Commissioner Nathan Symington last month, saying that Republicans on the FCC appear to be opening or reopening investigations into broadcast companies without evidence of wrongdoing in what appears to be an attempt to intimidate broadcasters. The new bill would seem to have no realistic chance of passage, however, given that Republicans control both chambers of Congress and that the bill would have to be signed by President Trump to become law. It is, however, an effort by Democrats to amplify their concerns over the current direction of the FCC.
Voice of America, a shortwave service launched in 1942 during the Second World War to bring news to countries under authoritarian control, is among U.S.-based news programming for overseas audiences targeted in a deep cut by the Trump administration. According to various media reports, VOA employees have been notified that they were all being placed on paid administrative leave with full benefits, effective immediately. Cuts to the Voice of America, as well as Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, Radio Marti and others are the result of reductions taking place inside the U.S. Agency for Global Media, where these programs originate. These cuts are part of the ongoing downsizing of the U.S. government. The agency operates with congressional funding to deliver news in 64 languages to listeners around the world via 6 networks, some of which were created during the Cold War. VOA's first broadcast, made in 1942, was in German and was transmitted to German listeners to counter Nazi propaganda. The Agency for Global Media's mission statement reads, "To inform, engage and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy." On Friday, March 15, President Trump signed the executive order for the cuts, noting in the language of the order itself that the services earmarked for reduction have been deemed unnecessary.
ARRL has released a logo and theme for this year's Field Day, June 28th and 29th, 2025. The theme for 2025 Field Day is Radio Connects, highlighting the many ways that wireless technology connects people across distances near and far. With more details on this year's Field Day theme and more, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this special report from League headquarters.
The event is part picnic, camp out, practice for emergencies, informal contest, and most of all, fun. ARRL Field Day is the most popular ham radio activity held annually in the U.S. and Canada. On the 4th weekend in June each year, more than 31,000 hams get together with their radio clubs, schools, or friends to operate from remote locations. Ham radio provides a connection, both for practical communications and to form relationships with fellow ham radio amateurs. No matter who you are or what your background or interests are, if you have an interest in radio and wireless technology, radio connects you with others. The theme is universal, says ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX. Local amateur radio clubs bridge generations. Contacts made across town or around the world allow cultural exchange right over the air. In times of crisis, radio connects those in need with information. The whole point of amateur radio is to connect, both literally and figuratively, she said. Amateur radio also inspires the next generation of technical leaders by providing a hands-on sandbox where students can gain experience in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. Make your plans to connect with radio for ARRL Field Day. Use the Field Day site locator to find a site near you. Clubs planning to host a site may list their event information there as well. And don't forget the swag. 2025 ARRL Field Day Radio Connects merchandise is available for pre-order from the ARRL store. All the fan-favorite gear is back. T-shirts complete with ARRL sections checklist on the back. Mugs and pins are available for shipping in late April 2025. But just a note, any orders from the ARRL store that contain 2025 ARRL Field Day merchandise will be held for shipping until the Field Day items are available in late April. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
For more information about 2025 ARRL Field Day and the Radio Connects theme, or to start planning your activation, visit www.arrl.org/field-day.
FCC Commissioner Jeffrey Starks has announced his intention to resign from his position this spring. In a letter to President Donald Trump and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Democratic commissioner formally confirmed his decision. In a statement, Starks said, "Serving the American people as a commissioner on the Federal Communications Commission has been the honor of my life. With my extraordinary fellow commissioners and the incredible career staff at the agency, we have worked hard to connect all Americans, promote innovation, protect consumers, and ensure national security." Appointed to the FCC in 2019 during President Trump's first term, Starks has been an advocate for the AM for Every Vehicle Act, emphasizing the importance of AM radio in vehicles and the FCC's role in advancing the legislation. Starks was also a leading voice in recent rulemaking actions centered around authorizing FM geotargeting. His impending departure, coupled with the earlier exit of former chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel, could hand the FCC's current Republican leadership an early majority as they await action around the nomination of Olivia Trusty to give the party its full 3 seats. Starks intends to remain active in the coming weeks, working alongside Brendan Carr, who was recently designated as FCC chairman, to continue the agency's mission. Following Starks' resignation, Commissioner Ana Gomez will be the FCC's ranking Democrat. By law, the FCC maintains a 5-member structure, with no more than 3 commissioners belonging to the same political party. This means that while Trump has the ability to nominate a successor for Starks, the seat must be filled by someone outside the GOP. This could give more power to Chairman Carr's recently launched Delete, Delete, Delete campaign, a comprehensive effort aimed at eliminating regulations deemed outdated or burdensome. This initiative could hold major policy changes in FCC rules and regulations.
At the 6th meeting of the African Telecommunications Union Task Group on Spectrum Recommendations held last week, a paper proposing the ATU promoting the development of amateur radio on the African continent was presented. The paper highlights that amateur radio is a vital resource for personal development, technological innovation, emergency response, and global cultural exchange. In Africa, it holds untapped potential to bridge communications gaps, especially in emergency and disaster situations, support drive technology enhancements, and equip individuals, especially youth, with critical technical skills. However, despite its numerous benefits, amateur radio remains underutilized across the continent due to an enabling and legal environment, limited infrastructure, and low public awareness. Addressing these barriers could unlock significant opportunities for growth, empowerment, and connectivity. With 37 International Amateur Radio Union member societies and approximately 3,000 licensed radio amateurs in Africa, this recommendation underscores the urgent need for a unified approach to promoting amateur radio in Africa. The recommendations emphasize regulatory reform, infrastructure enhancements for emergency response, capacity building, public awareness, and youth engagement. By adopting and implementing these strategies and recommending actions, the ATU and its partners would leverage amateur radio as a powerful tool for sustaining development, technical capacity building, and regional connectivity, particularly during times of disaster when reliable communication is crucial. During the discussion, delegates asked that countries that have a well-established amateur radio service share their experience. Both Egypt and South Africa indicated that they would share their experiences before the next meeting.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Something that you don't generally expect as a North American-based radio enthusiast is to listen in on Russian military communications during their war in Ukraine via web SDR, or that these communications would be passing through U.S. military satellites that are happy to just broadcast anything. Yet that's the situation that the Save It for Parts YouTube channel recently described. As it turns out, there's a gaggle of UFOs up there, as the U.S. DoD calls them. Between 1979 and 1989, 8 Flight Satcom launches took place, with Flight Satcom 7 and 8 still operating today. They were later joined by their successor, UHF Follow-On, with 11 launches between 1993 and 2003. All these operate in the UHF spectrum, with some UFO satellites also covering other bands. Their goal is to provide communication for the military's forces, with these satellites for the most part acting as simple repeaters. Over time, non-military parties learn to use these satellites too, even if it's technically illegal in many jurisdictions. As described in the video, if you listen in on web SDR streams from Ukraine, you can find not only encrypted military communications, but also unencrypted Russian radio traffic. It seems that in lieu of being provided with proper encrypted radio systems, Russian forces are using these U.S. military satellites for communication, much like how U.S. and NATO forces would have. This is reminiscent of how Russian troops were caught using Discord via Starlink for communication before Russian command shut down Discord.
The following volunteers have been elected to 2-year terms as ARRL section managers beginning July 1st, 2025. The new section managers are as follows. Craig S. McVeigh, November 0 Charlie Sierra Mike, has been elected ARRL Nevada section manager. He will replace John Bigley, November 7 Uniform Romeo, who has been the section manager since 2015. In the ARRL Northern New Jersey section, Norman Vizcarrondo, November Papa 4 Hotel, has been appointed section manager effective March 10, 2025, ahead of the term to which he has been elected. He succeeds Bob Boos, Whiskey 2 Oscar Delta, who passed away in February. Vizcarrondo previously served as director of the ARRL Hudson Division from 2023 through 2024 and has been vice director from 2022 through 2023. Re-elected section managers are as follows. Chris Van Winkle, Alpha Bravo 3 Whiskey Golf in the Maryland, D.C. section. Nancy Austin, Kilo Charlie 1 November Echo Kilo in the Rhode Island section. Stephen Hendricks, Kilo 6 Juliet Tango Bravo, will represent the San Joaquin Valley section. And finally, David Overton, Whiskey 5 Juliet Delta Oscar in the West Texas section. The ARRL field organization is composed of local volunteers who serve the frontline mission of the association. ARRL has 71 sections, and the section manager coordinates the volunteer efforts by appointing other key positions within the sections. Section managers are elected to 2-year terms, as voted on by ARRL members who reside in the section. For more information or to get involved in your local ARRL section, visit www.awrl.org/field-organization.
Some 175 scientists, students, professors, and amateur radio operators from around the world gathered in person and virtually on March 14th and 15th to share research, educate each other, and network at the annual AMSAT Workshop 2025. With all the details on the workshop, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this special report from ARRL headquarters in Newington.
HAMSCI, the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation Program, aims to promote collaboration between science, amateur radio, and education. The 2025 workshop was hosted this year by New Jersey Institute of Technology in Newark, New Jersey. The program featured 30 talks and 24 poster presentations, many focused on the HAMSCI community's research activities during the 2023 annular and 2024 total solar eclipses and its ongoing programs to involve amateur radio operators in collecting data for research on space weather and its impact on the ionosphere. I believe the workshop went very well, said HamSci lead Dr. Nathaniel Fussell, W2NAF, a professor at the University of Scranton. There were many stimulating presentations and discussions, and the workshop did an excellent job bringing together amateurs, students, and scientists from near and far. Among the presenters was Space Science Institute researcher Dr. Christina Collins, KDOXT, the 2025 recipient of the Dayton Ham Mentions Technical Achievement Award. Collins demonstrated how interactive data visualization software could be used as a platform for HamSci work, including visualization of data amassed from the Personal Space Weather Station, PSWS, project. ARRL was well represented at the conference with a team led by Director of Marketing and Innovation Bob Inderbitzen, NQ1R, who was also the keynote speaker at the Friday night banquet, and Hudson Division Director Ed Wilson, N2XDD. Inderbitzen focused his remarks on amateur radio's unique status as a technological sandbox for exploring and developing new communications technologies. He also highlighted ARRL's commitment to growing the amateur radio service through programs like the ARRL Teachers Institute on wireless technology, which prepares school teachers and college professors to develop student interest and skills in radio communications and technology. Last year, the ARRL Board of Directors established a roadmap for a bold new strategic direction, said Inderbitzen in his address. For 110 years, you might sum up the organization's purpose as promoting and protecting amateur radio. But last year, ARRL's mission was expanded to develop the next generation of radio amateurs and to be even more deliberate. A new advocacy was established to inspire youth. Inderbitzen also led a meeting of the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Program at the end of the workshop. You can read more about this HamSci workshop at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Owen Ruzansky, KD3ALD, an undergraduate at the University of Scranton, co-authored development of a contesting and DXing dashboard for the HamSci Personal Space Weather Station. Citizen scientist Mindy Hall, MD, KM1NDY, researched the effect of near-total solar eclipse on radio propagation of HF weak signal propagation reporter transmissions. While eating breakfast last Saturday morning at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, ARRL staff member Bob Inderbitzen, NQ1R, was also on the air from Bonaire, remotely working a pile-up from a station he visits often on the island. Physically in Newark, New Jersey for the annual HamSci workshop, Bob had his Wi-Fi connected laptop on the table in front of him, controlling the station in Bonaire as PJ4/NQ1R, and responding to FT8 calls in between bites of breakfast. Increasingly popular remote operating will be the focus of an upcoming special edition of the National Contest Journal. We thank Rich Mosen, W2VU, for this story.
Repair work that a ham radio operator and fellow club members conducted on a shared repeater site in Washington State has cost the ham his government job. A Stoughton County official said that Russell Pellberg, KA7MPX, was not authorized to give the other members of the Hell's Gate Amateur Radio Club access to the secure site, and that their work caused a communication outage and a power meter disturbance for other users of the site. County agencies operate 2 nearby radio repeaters, and the local utility, Clearwater Power Company, also has facilities on the site. According to a report in the Lewiston Tribune, Pellberg said he had discussed the work with county commissioners and they appeared to be supportive. He told investigators that he had even written a resolution for the county to vote on, but there were delays producing the document. The newspaper report said he has apologized on behalf of the club for proceeding ahead of the necessary vote and that the hams meant no harm. No criminal charges were filed or recommended. Pellberg, who has worked in government for 35 years, was terminated from his job as the county public works director in late January.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The recipients of the 2025 Dayton Hamvention Awards were announced on March 11th, 2025. The selection process was highly competitive, given the outstanding quality of nominations submitted this year. We extend our heartfelt congratulations to the winners for 2025, said Dayton Hamvention Awards Chair Michael Kalter, W8CI. The Technical Achievement Award is going to Dr. Christina Collins, KD8OXT, who serves as the Chief Operations Scientist for the AMSAT Personal Space Weather Station Network. In this role, she collaborates with citizen scientists to pinpoint significant events, organize campaigns, and ensure PSWS data is validated and curated for scientific purposes. As of now, listeners can hear her voice on WWV at 8 minutes past the hour and WWVH at 40 minutes past each hour, where she introduces the test signal for the WWV and WWVH Scientific Modulation Working Group. Dr. Collins has been instrumental in organizing numerous workshops through AMSAT and has guided many undergraduate and graduate students in radio science projects, including instrument deployments, eclipse campaigns, and data analysis. She is a dedicated member of the Case Amateur Radio Club, W8EDU, working alongside her colleagues to integrate amateur radio into university teaching and research. At the Space Science Institute, Dr. Collins employs virtual reality and sonification in her research to explore geospace and other interdisciplinary scientific questions. Her primary research interests lie in using open-source hardware and software to enhance participation and accelerate progress in science and engineering. The Special Achievement Award goes to Julio Ripoll, WD4R. Julio received his first amateur radio license in 1977. His fascination with hurricanes began in childhood, sparked when Hurricane Betsy in 1965 damaged his family's home in Miami, Florida, causing water to pour into his bedroom. In 1980, Dr. Neil Frank, then director of the National Hurricane Center, requested an amateur radio station within the NHC to facilitate communications with the Caribbean during hurricanes. Julio was chosen for this important task. WX4NHC handled its first hurricane that year, and Julio's initial 2-year assignment with the NHC has since extended to 45 years, covering over 100 hurricanes. In 2010, shortly after the Haiti earthquake, Julio was tasked with setting up and managing operations between the University of Miami Hospital in Florida and the UM Field Hospital in Haiti. He swiftly coordinated with the U.S. and Haitian officials, organizing a team of amateur radio operators from across the U.S. to run HH2/WX4NHC in Haiti. Beyond the field hospital, the team provided vital communication links to the U.S. Navy hospital ship Comfort, facilitating helicopter and speedboat patient transfers that saved many lives. Julio and his team's use of amateur radio in public service demonstrated significant merit, earning high regard for amateur radio capabilities. The Club of the Year goes to the RV Radio Network. Its roots date back over 40 years to a chapter of the Texas Good Sam's Club, which included a few ham radio operators. These hams started a net that drew in other Good Sam RVers from neighboring states, leading to gatherings at campgrounds where their fellow net members lived. The net quickly outgrew the Texas chapter, gaining members nationwide, and thus the RV Radio Network was born. Today, RVRN boasts over 450 members. From the very beginning, our club aimed to organize activities that not only expanded knowledge of ham radio and related technology, but also to allow us to enjoy RV travel and meet fellow hams and RVers across the country. They keep in touch virtually through various ham radio nets and meet in person whenever possible. They have 10 different HF nets each week, along with a weekly international Echolink multi-mode net and a video net over the internet. They hold 2 major rallies a year featuring educational forums and seminars, tours of RV radio equipment and antenna configurations. If there's an interesting industry nearby, they might invite a guest speaker to share some insights about the operations. And of course, they enjoy the social events and entertainment common to typical RV events. Amateur of the Year is awarded to Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, from Union, Kentucky. He earned his novice ticket in 1976 at the remarkable age of 5. making him one of the youngest licensed amateur radio operators ever. Currently a visiting professor of chemistry at Xavier University, Neil has a rich history of education. He previously taught high school chemistry and sponsored the Amateur Radio Club for 28 years at Evansville, Harrison, and Bloomington High School South. During his tenure, he introduced over 3,600 students to amateur radio in STEM classrooms, and Bloomington South consistently excelled in the high school division of School Club Roundup. In 2019, Neil co-founded and became the camp director of Youth on the Air Americas, which connects young amateurs with peers through activities that encourage their continued involvement in ham radio. GOTA groups organize peer-led activities such as summer camps, contesting opportunities, and special events for licensed amateur radio operators under the age of 26. Neil's contributions to the amateur radio community extend even further. He is a contributing editor of the Next Gen Contesters column in the National Contest Journal, a member of the ARIS USA Education Committee, and the founder and former host of the Ham Radio Talk Live webcast. The 2025 Hamvention will be held Friday, May 16th through Sunday, May 18th, 2025 at the Greene County Fairground and Expo Center, 210 Fairgrounds Road in Xenia, Ohio.
Amateur radio has provided the inspiration for a new initiative within the Resilient Communications Program at the U.S. Naval Undersea Warfare Center Division in the state of Washington. Organizers in Keyport, Washington are working to use ham radio's reliability as the backup for its emergency communications when there are disruptions to the internet, computer function, or mobile phone service. Eric Seeley, the division's director of innovation in Keyport, said the program embraces the technology of ham radio for this purpose and will be establishing a network of licensed hams to make use of amateur radio frequencies when the need arises. Organizers have also been encouraging nearby naval bases to join in their efforts. The Keyport team is reaching beyond the military, too. Everybody needs an Elmer, so organizers have contacted local ham radio clubs as well as emergency responders to help with training the new operators. Some members of the team have already obtained their license for the General Mobile Radio Service, but acknowledge the next step is the FCC's technician test to become an amateur.
If you've been listening to Radio Deutsche Amateur Radio Club's shortwave program broadcast on the 31-meter band from Wifferton, England, or from Ingolstadt, Germany, on radio channel 292, a ham-owned AM broadcast station, you now have another option. The program, produced by Germany's National Amateur Radio Society, is now being carried on a test basis by the museum's Radio Plattenkreis transmitter in Bad Ischl, Austria, run by OE5 TPM. During the month of March, you can listen from 1900 to 2000 CET on Saturdays on 1476 kHz. The DARC welcomes reception reports for the 1 kilowatt station, and these should be emailed directly to radio@darc.de.
With the Atlantic hurricane season on the horizon, ongoing job cuts at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are throwing the agency's future into question among forecasters, scientists, skywarn spotters, and other hams. Published reports about the downsizing of a number of U.S. federal agencies, bracing for another 1,000 job cuts on top of its recent loss of an estimated 1,300 staffers. National Weather Service, part of NOAA, has announced earlier this month it was temporarily halting launches of some of its weather balloons because of staffing shortages. Data gathered by the weather balloons has been, among other things, an important source of data used by hams and others who regularly track the solar cycle. Sources told the Washington Post that the government may not renew leases for NOAA's Weather and Climate Center in Maryland or for its Radar Operations Center in Oklahoma. According to a report in the New York Times, additional cuts will mean a reduction in NOAA's staffing by 20%. The Washington Post said that the National Weather Service now has fewer than 4,000 on staff, smallest roster in recent history. A number of amateur radio nets, including the Hurricane Watch Net and the Maritime Mobile Service Net, interact with the National Weather Service during storms, passing traffic, and transmitting critical bulletins. It was unclear what impact these staffing cuts will ultimately have.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If you are watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes. I'm trying to focus on those entities that will be available in the next week. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next 7 days might be helpful to your operating schedule. However, let's start today with some general DX information. You need to look for this in 2 weeks. A group of operators from Azerbaijan are planning a DXpedition to the rare location of Kizi Mountain is 4 Kilo Zero Tango on March 29th and 30th. Activity will be on sideband and FT8 on 80 through 10 meters. Details regarding QSL and real-time updates will be communicated during the event. And again, that's just the 29th and 30th of March. The surprise for me this week was the arrival of V6WG from the Federated States of Micronesia. Here's a bit of information about the FSM, or the Federated States of Micronesia, from the CIA Fact Book. Each of the 4 states that compose the Federated States of Micronesia, Chuuk, Khosrae, Pohnpei, and Yap, has its own unique history and cultural traditions. The first humans arrived in what is now FSM in the 2nd millennium BC. In the 800s AD, construction of the artificial islets at the Nam Madol complex in Pohnpei began, with the main architecture being built around 1200. At its height, Nam Madol united the approximately 25,000 people of Pohnpei under the Sadur dynasty. By 1250, Khosrae was united in kingdoms centered in Lelu Yap. Yap society became strictly hierarchical, with chiefs receiving tributes from islands as much as 700 miles away. Widespread human settlement in Chuuk began in the 1300s, and the different islands in the Chuuk Lagoon were frequently at war with each other. Portuguese and Spanish explorers visited a few of the islands in the 1500s, and Spain began exerting nominal but not day-to-day control over some of the islands, which they named the Caroline Islands, in the 1600s. In 1899, Spain sold all of the FSM to Germany. Japan seized the islands in 1914 and was granted a League of Nations mandate to administer them in 1920. The Japanese Navy built bases across most of the islands and headquartered it at Chuuk. The U.S. bombed Chuuk in 1944, but largely bypassed the other islands in its leapfrog campaign across the Pacific. In 1947, the FSM came under U.S. administration as part of the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, which comprised 6 districts: Chuuk, the Marshall Islands, the Northern Mariana Islands, Palau, Pohnpei, and Yap. Khosrae was separated from Pohnpei into a separate district in 1977. In 1979, Chuuk, Khosrae, Pohnpei, and Yap ratified the Federated States of Micronesia Constitution and declared independence, while the other 3 districts opted to pursue separate political status. There are significant inter-island rivalries stemming from their different histories and cultures. Chuuk, the most populous but poorest state, has pushed for secession, but an independent referendum has been repeatedly postponed. FSM is located in Oceania. It is an island group in the North Pacific Ocean, about 3/4 of the way from Hawaii to Indonesia. The climate is tropical, heavy year-round rainfall, especially in the eastern islands, located on the southern edge of the typhoon belt with occasionally severe damage from typhoons. The islands vary geologically from high mountainous islands to low coral atolls. Volcanic outcroppings on Pohnpei, Khosrae, and Chuuk Islands exist. I hope you find that a little bit interesting. I didn't know anything about the Federated States of Micronesia, and I had to look them up, and I thought I'd share it with you. We also have this press release from 3Y0K, the Bouvet Island team. In February of 2026, or in less than a year, an international team of 24 amateur radio operators will land on Bouvet Island. Bouvet is a Norwegian overseas territory and lies in the South Atlantic Ocean, with 93% of its surface covered by ice and snow. It sets the record as the most remote uninhabited island on Earth and ranks number 10 on the most wanted DXCC listing at Club Log. Operating as 3Y0K, our team will attempt to give as many all-time new ones as possible and be active in all amateur radio bands from 10 to 160. We will direct our attention to human modes, but will be active in CW, sideband, FT8 RTTY, and QO100 satellite, using up to 12 stations. So this is a major effort. We have the necessary permit to land on Bouvet by helicopter, issued by the Norwegian Polar Institute. Our plan is to start the sea journey in Cape Town, South Africa, from where an icebreaker under Icelandic flag will take us to the island in 7 days. Since landing depends on the weather conditions, we are scheduled to be on and around the island for up to 21 days. A helicopter will assist us in bringing ashore a significant amount of equipment to set up a camp with 2 radio tents. One radio tent on the lower area of Cape Fee and one radio tent on the upper area that has a better takeoff angle to North America, and that will be the main North American station. The logistics behind this project are complex and require a budget of $1.65 million. Most of the money is used to pay for the services offered by the icebreaker and its crew, the helicopter with its 2 pilots and 1 mechanic, as well as the fuel. Each team member is contributing a significant amount to the budget, and that they will also incur costs for commercial airfare, 2 side trips to Norway required for various tasks, winter sleeping bags, clothing, etc. Passionate amateur operators and clubs around the world, as well as multiple companies, are supporting this project. As a prime example, the Northern California DX Foundation has pledged up to $200,000, of which half matched against donations received from outside of North America. Companies such as DX Engineering, ICOM, RF Power, and ACOM are supporting the team with a multitude of radio equipment components. We also teamed up with small private group to share the large costs of the DXpedition. Please visit our website at www.3y0k.com to read more about this project, the team, the latest news, and learn about the complex preparations the team is engaged in to ensure that its mission will be executed safely and successfully. At this time, we are looking to raise an additional $200,000 to avoid putting further financial strain on the team. So if you can help out, even $10 or $20, please go to 3y0k.com and pledge that. Thank you in advance for your support, and we look forward to contacting you from the most uninhabited island on Earth. And that was from the Team 3y0k. So we go from one of the coldest and most remote places on Earth to a Caribbean location. Did you ever want to work from a Caribbean location and never leave your house? Here's your opportunity. Quote, announcing the 2025 PJ6Y DXpedition to Saba with co-leaders Greg, W6IZT, Dean, W2FQ, and Jeff, NM1Y, in collaboration with Youth on the Air. They are thrilled to announce an upcoming DXpedition to Saba Island. They plan to arrive on Saba on October 17th and be on the air through October 29th. Quote, our primary operating site is situated on the north side of the island at an elevation of approximately 1,200 feet. The team will consist of 14 on-island operators, including 8 young operators under the age of 25. Notably, 4 of these young ops participated as remote operators in the recent 3 Delta II Yankee DXpedition to Rotuma. The local team will be complemented by 25 to 30 remote operators, so there's your chance. We will have 3 stations available for local operators as well. We extend a special thanks to the Northern California DX Foundation for their generous grant to construct 2 next-gen RIB-2 stations based on Elecraft K4Ds for remote operation. Activity will be on 80 through 6 meters plus satellite, and we will also participate in the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. So if this is something you'd like to participate in, just drop me a note, thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll hook you up with the right people.
We will be back with more from our DX mentor, Bill Sawyer's AJ8B, after we take this quick pause for stations along the network to identify. You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
This section of DX News comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. So this is where we're focusing on just what it's going to be on in the next week. So let's see how many of these you're able to work. Maurizio, IK2GZU, is headed back to Tanzania, where he will be QRV as 5 Hotel 3 Mike Bravo, March 18th to April 8th. He will have a Yaesu FT891 in dipoles and a ground plane. He hopes to upload QSO's Daily, the Logbook of the World, and Club Log, and you can QSL via his home call or LOTW or EQSL. The EIDX group is currently active as 6 Yankee 7 Echo India from St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica until March 24th. In line with their previous expeditions, which were 5 Victor 7, 7 Papa 8, 7Q7, 9N7, and V26, they will operate on 160 through 6 meters CW, sideband, and FT8. They will have 8 stations on the air, and this year they will use an ACOM power amplifier on 6 meters. And you can QSL them via M0OXO. And I've heard them on the air a lot, and they're very active. And if you need Jamaica or you just want to work them, please do so. Mike, M0MDS, is currently QRV as J6 from St. Lucia, J6 M0MDS until March 24th. He will be active from 10 to 15 meters using CW, FT8, and sideband. QSL his home call. Fred, G4XWM, is currently QRV as V4-G4XWM from St. Kitts and Nevis until March 29. He is operating on HF using CW and sideband, and you can QSL him via LOTW or club log. Mike, VE2XB, will be active as J38XB from Grenada until March 31. Activity will be 160 through 10 meters using sideband with some CW, and you can QSL his home call. I checked the DX cluster today, and there not have been any spots yet, but keep your ears open for this one. Mike's a really good operator, and I'm sure he'll be on there. Rick, WE9G, has been very active as V6WG for Micronesia, and that was the station I mentioned earlier when we did a little discussion on Micronesia. He will be QRV until April 1st. His IoT designator is OC-059, and he will be on all bands from 80 to 6 meters. He said that 160 might be possible. He will mainly be using FT4, FT8 with some CW and sideband, and as the others, he can be QSL'd via club log. Ishmael, A Papa 6 Papa Echo, plans a SOTA activity from St. Vincent as J87 Papa Echo until March 30th. He has been spotted several times, so I know he's QRV. He planned to be on 20 through 6 meters using a Yaesu FT891 and various antennas, and you can QSL him via his home call of 8 Papa 6 Papa Echo. And one of the best CW operators I know, Bud, AA3B, plans to be active from Antigua as V26 Kilo between March 25th and April 2nd. He will focus mainly on CW outside of the CQ Worldwide SSB WPX contest, and you can QSL his home call, LOTW, or OQRS. And finally, there's a group of Czechoslovakian operators who will be operating from Rodriguez Island as 3 Baker 9 Delta Juliet from March 24th to April 5th. They plan to work on frequencies from 160 through 10 meters using CW, FT8, and sideband mode. And you can QSL that group via OK6DJ and LOTW. So there's a handful of things that are going to be on this next 7 days, and I hope you get to work them, and I hope you let me know what you think of this format. The most recent DX Mentor YouTube episode is with the DX Adventure team, who is wrapping up their DXpedition to Andaman Island, and I think by the time this airs, they'll have shut down. Check it out on the DX Mentor YouTube channel or on the DX Mentor podcast. You can also join us on the DX Mentor Facebook page to keep tabs on what is current and what is coming. And I can tell you, there's something coming that you're going to want to listen to or watch. So here's some contest updates. I know that the ARL contest sheet is read elsewhere in the podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in the log that may otherwise be difficult to get. Here are some details on one of my favorite contests, the 2025 CQ Worldwide WPX contest. The sideband weekend is March 29th to 30th, and the CW weekend is May 24th to 25th. The contest starts at 0 Zulu on Saturday, which frankly is Friday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, and ends at 23:59 Zulu on Sunday. So I could go on a little bit, but I just went to the CQ Worldwide WPX website and I found this explanation. Quote, thrill in the chase of thousands of unique call sign prefixes from hundreds of DX entities in the world's largest Everyone Works Everyone radio contests. The CQ Worldwide WPX, or the WPX for short, contests are immensely popular operating activities that enjoy broad participation by amateurs around the globe. The events attract amateurs at all levels of proficiency from beginner to world champion. WPX features a diversity of categories for single operator and multi-operator stations, including youth overlays for entrants 25 years of age or younger. So please come and join the fun. Here are the basics of the contest. Amateurs worldwide try to contact as many amateurs and prefixes as possible during the period of operation. Single operator stations may operate 36 of the 46 hours, and off times must be a minimum of 60 minutes, during which time no QSO can be logged. Multi-operator stations may operate for the full 48 hours. Contacts are valid on 160, 80, 40, 17, 21, and the 28 megahertz bands. No work bands, please. The exchange is RST report and a progressive contact serial number starting with 01 for the first contact. With a call like AJ8B, you can see why I like these contests, because I become something they're chasing. So I always enjoy that. Please send me an email for any details you need on any of the things we talked about. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-whale Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups.
It is time once again for AMSAT satellite shorts from all over. And we begin this week with a release from NASA telling us that they recently turned off Voyager 1's cosmic ray subsystem experiment and Voyager 2's low-energy charged particle instrument to conserve power. At 43 years old, both craft are at their half-life power levels, now operating at around 235 watts each and losing about 4 watts of power generation capacity each year. In part, this is due to the 87.7-year half-life cycle of plutonium-238, which powers the probe's 3 multi-100-watt radioisotope thermoelectric generators. Next, another failure from SPHEREx as Starship blew up over the Caribbean again. Starship Flight 8 seems to have suffered the same fate as its predecessors. 8 minutes into Ship 34's powered flight, 4 of its 6 Raptor engines shut down and the craft began to tumble. Minutes later, it exploded over the Caribbean, producing a similar spectacular light show as the last flight. In better news, Super Heavy Booster 15 was again caught by its launch tower, an incredible feat that is somehow slowly starting to look routine. And our final satellite short brings us to the moon, as another private lunar lander carrying a drill, vacuum, and other experiments for NASA touched down on the moon on March 2nd, the latest in a string of companies looking to kickstart business on Earth's celestial neighbor ahead of astronaut missions. Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lander descended from lunar orbit on autopilot, aiming for the slopes of an ancient volcanic dome in an impact basin on the moon's northeastern edge of the near side. While everywhere on the lunar surface, Intuitive Machines' IM-2 Athena lander touched down near the moon's south pole, 250 meters from its target in the Mont Mouton region inside of a crater. But while a softer landing than last time, the IM-1 in February 2024, the lander appears to have fallen over into an incorrect attitude, ending up somewhat on its side. A day later, the mission was declared over, with little hope of even partial recovery due to solar panels oriented in the wrong direction and the extreme cold temperatures in the crater.
From W2XBS, you are listening to the weekly news and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, on the K2RHI repeater in Troy, New York.
Welcome to the 31st segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for giving us permission to use his website in the production of these segments. Now sit back and enjoy this chapter of Ham Radio History. The Chicago Plan. Amateurs were making progress taming the QRM problem. Sometimes a solution did not involve a new invention or even technology at all. In a drama worthy of a Broadway play, Central Division Manager R.H.G. Matthews, 9ZN, described the bleak situation in Chicago before the war. Acute rivalry between local clubs had resulted in gangs in the north, south, and west sides of the city, each having as a primary object the annihilation of the aerials of the others. The situation had gone from bad to worse. In fact, during the Washington's birthday tests, someone tore down Matthews' own aerial just before the relay began. A replacement was hurriedly erected, and then two friends sat out under the mast with .38 caliber cannons and chased away exactly 8 individuals, each with his little side-cutting pliers. Clearly, urban QRM was not the only problem arising from lack of cooperation. Something had to be done. Individual influential amateurs in each Chicago area met and worked together with ARRL City Manager Schnell to discuss the situation and come up with a plan they could all endorse. They formed an executive radio council that included officers from each constituent club, all of which were ARRL affiliates, to administer and regulate operations in the metropolitan area. New clubs were also formed in areas where no previous one existed. As a representative body with personal relationships among the officers, the council was able to get endorsements from the various groups. Their intent was to be fair to everyone, while at the same time not interfere with each individual group's activities. Cross-membership was encouraged. The dues were regulated to be all the same, and meeting dates were coordinated so as to avoid schedule conflicts. The average club size was about 100 members, and the most successful were the ones that concentrated on the social aspects of the hobby as well as the technical. The council went to great lengths to foster an environment of cooperation and friendship, the only way to obtain a foundation on which the authority of the council could be based. It drew up a set of 15 traffic regulations stipulating hours of operation, what kinds of operation could occur in each time period, operating procedures, and what defined local as opposed to long-distance work. It also defined the rule of traffic officers and their duties. Crucial to making this work was acknowledging that some hams were interested in long-distance experiments, but not necessarily in handling message traffic. Thus, there were 3 classes of operators: local, long-distance traffic, and long-distance non-traffic. No station was permitted to work both long-distance periods on the same night. This single new realization went a long way towards eliminating the friction between the groups. Each club handled enforcement under the coordination of the city manager. After investigating a violation, the club to which the offender belonged would be fined. If the offender was not a member of any club, the one in whose territory he resided would be fined. It was then up to that club to collect payment from the individual amateur, if possible, or ensure that no further violations occurred. But it turned out that the system worked so well that very few fines were ever charged. The council also organized a direction finder squad whose job was to locate unlicensed stations or other unidentified offenders. Proud of their accomplishment, Matthews boasted that these methods, combined with the loyal mutual cooperation of our big fraternal radio club families, have converted Chicago from a radio Bolshevist community to what I now believe it to be the best big radio city in the United States. The Chicago Plan, as it came to be known, was a model for cooperative operation. The Smith Cup was a one-time award in the form of a loving cup donated by Seymour Wemyss Smith of the Hartford Courant, an ARRL member, to be given to the amateur performing the most outstanding feat in the interest of citizen radio during the summer months as determined by a committee. R.S. Cruz, 3ABI, agreed to chair the selection committee and enlisted other well-known amateurs including Vermilia, 1ZE, Goat, 2JU, E.H. Merritt, 4YA, J.M. Clayton, 5ZL, A.E. Bessie, 6ZK, Royal Mumford, 7ZJ, Reverend A.J. Manning, and 8ZJ, and R.H.G. Matthews, 9ZN. What exactly could constitute a most outstanding feat was unspecified, but could include achievements in on-air operation, technology, organization, or publication. Regardless, the award was clearly aimed at summer when operating was more difficult. In spring 1922, the Smith Cup was awarded to the Chicago Executive Radio Council in recognition of the Chicago Plan. it is unclear whether Matthews as a committee member participated in the selection. For the first time, calls heard contained reports from stations hearing calls from every district, and 9CA and 9CG reported hearing both coasts at the same time, another first in a decade that would produce many more. Included in this material are quotes from the following: R.H.G. Matthews, The Chicago Plan, QST, May 1921, page 23. A Cup for Summer Achievement, QST, July 1921, page 25. Chicago Council Gets Smith Cup, QST, April 1922, page 31. With a tip of the TWIAR cap to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, to prepare this chapter, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
In the U.S., the entire 6 GHz band will be opened up to a greater operation of unlicensed VLP, or very low power, devices under an FCC final rule that takes effect on May 5th. The band, which comprises frequencies between 5.9257 and 7.125 GHz, is used by mobile service, fixed service, and fixed satellite service across 4 sub-bands. VLPs, which include wearable devices, augmented reality devices, and healthcare monitors, typically have an integrated antenna and cover short distances. This latest action by the Commission, published in the Federal Register on March 6th, provides greater spectrum for various portable devices operating with the same power levels and operational requirements of other very low-power devices.
Join DX enthusiasts from around the world as they gather for the 76th International DX Convention in Visalia, California. The popular event runs April 11th through the 13th, 2025. This ARRL convention will feature several days of exciting programming, forums, and seminars. It is sponsored by the Northern California DX Club. On Friday, April 11th, a full-day track of the Next Generation DXing program will feature the latest in how DXpedition leaders are planning missions. Using innovative technologies like radio in a box, providing data links in extreme and remote conditions, and building teams to deliver incredible numbers of contacts with hams around the world. ARRL representatives will be on hand for the event and to document some of the seminars on video for the ARRL HQ YouTube channel and the ARRL Learning Center. ARRL Southwestern Division Vice Director Ned Stearns, AA7A, is among the co-chairs who have organized the convention. There will be on-site DXCC card checking. An exhibit hall will let attendees visit with manufacturers and retailers of amateur radio gear. Other exciting learning opportunities include a Contest Academy and DX Academy. More information about the event, including registration and accommodations, can be found at www.dxconvention.com. Pre-registration rates are valid until April 3rd, 2025.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Recently, I received a question in relation to the Bold Yak project. If you're not familiar, the Bold Yak project aims to create a modular, bidirectional and distributed signal processing and control system that leverages GNU radio. I know I've said that several times now, and I suspect I'm going to say it several more times before we're done. I was asked about a specific radio, and if this project could make it use a frequency that the supplied software didn't cover. The answer is deceptively simple, and if you know me at all, you know what's coming. It depends. As with many things, what it depends on is not fixed. I'll come back to the question, but I'm making a diversion past a magical place, the local hardware store. You can buy everything you need to build a house, with the caveat that some assembly is required. GNU Radio is similar for building a signal processing system, but, wait for it, some assembly is required. In the context of GNU Radio, this means that you'll need to collect all the bits and wire them together. Fortunately, you're unlikely to need personal protective equipment or access to a first aid kit. Unless, of course, the idea of playing with computers gives you palpitations, in which case I'd recommend that you go see your doctor. One of the less obvious things you'll come across with GNU Radio is how to bring signal processing into the physical realm. In other words, how do you get a signal into your computer, known as a source, and get it out, called a sink? The ability to talk to physical hardware arrives in roughly 3 different ways. Let's call them native, library, and abstraction. Native access requires that GNU Radio already knows about the hardware out of the box. Library access requires that the hardware manufacturer has provided software libraries, also known as drivers, allowing GNU Radio to communicate. And finally, abstraction is where a third party has written a library that knows how to talk to hardware from different manufacturers. The distinction between these is almost arbitrary. For example, abstraction might require a driver from a hardware manufacturer. Similarly, because all this software is open source, native can include software from other projects, like the RTL SDR blocks from Osmocom, open source mobile communications, and UHD blocks written by Attis Research, which in turn can be seen as an abstraction. As I said, some assembly required. I will point out that this provides a great deal of flexibility, albeit at the cost of complexity. There's still no such thing as a free lunch. At this point, you might shake your head and run away. I get that. It can be daunting. Before you do, consider the scenario where you have a working system and you upgrade your hardware. In GNU Radio world, you'll need to figure out how to configure the new hardware, and then all your other stuff will continue to work. The alternative is upgrading each of your applications to connect to your new radio, and in doing so, run the risk of making your old radio obsolete, even if you are collecting them, let's say, for posterity rather than hoarding, because radio amateurs never hoard anything, right? Back to the original question. Can GNU Radio make a radio use frequencies that the software that came with the radio cannot? As I said, it depends. First of all, the hardware needs to actually be able to support the frequency. Then someone needs to have written a library to use that frequency. Then GNU Radio needs to be able to use that library. That said, the chances of that happening are much higher than the chance of the hardware manufacturer rolling out this feature within your lifetime. Before you start yelling at me, yes, this is manufacturer dependent. Some provide open source tools, many still don't. There are alternative ways to access different frequencies. The Pluto SDR is a computer and radio in a box. You can connect to it, change some settings, and have it access a whole lot more frequencies. In some ways, it's like adding or removing jumpers on a traditional circuit board. Another approach is to use an up or down converter, essentially a piece of hardware connected between antenna and radio that translates frequencies to different bands. A down converter allows you to use the 23 cm band on a radio that's only capable of 70 cm. Similarly, an up converter allows your 70 cm radio to hear HF signals. If you see a symmetry here, you didn't imagine it. You need both to transmit and receive, sold together in the same box as a transverter. Just so we're clear, the radio is still using the 70 cm band, but the RF coming in and out of the antenna connected to the transverter is on a different band entirely. It's why my Yaesu FT857D has 3 menu options, 89, 90 and 91, to adjust the display to show the actual RF frequency. As an aside, you could use this functionality if your radio is off frequency by a known amount. As I've said before, GNU Radio is a powerful tool. It contains many different moving parts. The system is complex and unwieldy, but with it comes the promise of doing some amazing stuff. The whole point of the BoldYack project is to make this all accessible to the wider amateur community, not just computer geeks and software radio nerds. If you have questions, feel free to drop me a line. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Dozens of amateur radio clubs have made plans to host an ARRL Ham Radio Open House in April. With all the details on how your club can host its own open house, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who filed this report.
The nationwide event is centered around World Amateur Radio Day on April 18th. 2025 is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the International Amateur Radio Union, IARU. While we've been using radio well over 100 years, amateur radio operators continue to be on the cutting edge of innovation and electrical engineering. Modern weak signal modes, digital modulation schemes, and software-defined radios show that ham radio is a vibrant and modern hobby. For many students, it also provides a pathway towards being the technology innovators of the future. ARRL Ham Radio Open House is a time to show our communities how modern and innovative amateur radio is and to welcome them to be a part of it. ARRL, HamSci, and SciStarter are encouraging clubs to have visitors at their sites participate in a hand-on activity that can count towards the nationwide goal of documenting 1 million acts of science in April, which is the Citizens Science Month. The ARRL Public Relations Committee held a live webinar on March 19th to help clubs form and promote their ARRL Ham Radio Open House. A recording of that event can be seen on the ARRL HQ YouTube channel. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Thank you, John. A publicity kit is also available. You can find an open house or list yours at www.arrl.org/open-house. Learn more at www.arrl.org/world-amateur-radio-day.
New York State's Erie Canal was completed 200 years ago, providing a waterway connection between the East Coast and the Midwest by linking New York's Hudson River with Lake Erie. Now the Erie Canal is getting ready to be a source of a connection for amateur radio operators who will be on the air in September at various points, including the 524 miles known as the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor. And you can get involved. September can't come soon enough for the Warren County Radio Club W2WCR, whose members are planning a club picnic and POTA activation to mark the bicentennial of the Erie Canal. The club's president, Bernie N1NDN, told Matt, K2EAG, and Mike, N2MAK, that the POTA event the two have organized from the 16th through the 25th of September provides a perfect opportunity for everyone to try operating a portable station while celebrating this historic canal. While most of the portable stations are likely to be at various points along the route known as the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor, not all the activations are likely to be on dry land. Matt said that the Radio Association of Western New York, W2PE, hopes to operate aboard the museum ship USS Little Rock, CLG-4, in Buffalo. While at the opposite end of the canal in Albany, hams are hoping to activate another museum ship, the USS Slater, WW2DEM. Matt and Mike are looking for as many individual hams and clubs as possible to sign up. Meanwhile, there's plenty of room along the corridor, which has the POTA designation of US-6532. The radio event is timed to coincide with the World Canal Conference that kicks off on the 21st of September in Buffalo. If you'd like to help honor the canal's history, contact Matt at K2EAG@ARRL.net.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. we mentioned in past reports about several satellites being launched. Well, SpaceX Falcon 9 was delayed 7 times. It finally launched March 15th, and Haight ICM, Tevel 2 satellites 1 through 9, as well as UVSQ Sat NG, were finally placed in orbit. Fortunately, the main mission for Haight ICM is to be an FM repeater. The commissioning will take about 2 weeks to complete. The downlink is 436.666 MHz, and the uplink is 145.875 MHz. Both FM. No subtone required. For the Tevel 2 satellites, the downlink is 436.400 MHz, and the uplink is 145.970 MHz, both FM. This makes it so easy. No matter which Tevel 2 satellite you choose, the frequencies are the same. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for a look at space weather and this week's propagation forecast report. Solar activity reached moderate levels due to an isolated M1.5 flare on March 19th. Solar wind parameters were enhanced, possibly due to a combination of weak transient and coronal hole high-speed streams activity. Disturbances in the solar wind are anticipated through March 20th, in response to persistent transient and HSS effects, as well as possible flanking influences of a nearby coronal mass ejection passage that departed the Sun on March 17th. Solar wind parameters are expected to slowly diminish on March 21st. So looking at the solar flux values for the near term, it will be 195 on March 21st, 200 on March 22nd, 195 on March 23rd, 190 on March 24th, and 180 on March 25th. There were 2 minor radio blackouts observed from March 11th through the 14th. A chance for R1 to R2, minor to moderate, radio blackouts exists through March 23rd. Predicted sunspot numbers for March are 132, with a high of 139, and a low of 132. The Australian Space Weather Forecast Centre forecast predicts solar activity to be R0 to R1. The solar wind speed is expected to be high to moderate. G1 or G2 geomagnetic conditions are expected. HF radio propagation conditions are expected to be mildly degraded. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service and read what the numbers mean. Also check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA, where a propagation bulletin archive is available. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for ham radio website.
Just ahead in Radio Sport this week, a lot of great contests. March 20th through the 21st, the Walk for the Bacon QRP contest, that's CW. March 20th, the NAQCC CW Sprint, CW there. March 20th, the NTC QSO Party, CW. March 22nd and 23rd, the Africa All Mode International DX Contest, CW Phone and Digital. Also on March 23rd, the North American Single Sideband Sprint, that is phone. And on March 23rd as well, the UBA Spring Contest, that's 6 meters, CW and phone. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on March 29th, the Central Dakota Amateur Radio Club Hamfest hosting the ARRL North Dakota State Convention. That's in Bismarck, North Dakota. April 5th, the RARS Fest hosting the ARRL North Carolina State Convention. That's in Raleigh, North Carolina. April 11th and 12th, the Greene County Hamfest hosting the ARRL Oklahoma State Convention in Claremore, Oklahoma. And on April 25th through the 27th, the Big Bear Ham Escape hosting the ARRL Orange Section Convention. That's in Big Bear Lake, Florida. And remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find events in your area. In early April, amateur radio operators will have several opportunities to participate in Parks on the Air, POTA events. The 3rd annual Georgia Parks on the Air will be held April 5th through the 6th, 2025, hosted by the North Fulton Amateur Radio League, NFARL. Last year, 51 out of 52 parks were activated with over 400 hunters and nearly 12,000 QSOs. More information and updated rules are available on the web at 2025 Georgia State Parks on the Air, POTA-NFARL. And on April 12th from 1300 to 2259 UTC, that's 8 a.m. To 5:59 p.m. Central Daylight Time, the Jackson County Amateur Radio Association in Mississippi will host the 3rd Annual Mississippi State Parks on the Air. Modes of operation include single sideband, CW, and FT8/4, or any other legal mode, and any ham radio band that is legal in POTA may be used. Also, VHF, UHF simplex on 2 meters and 70 centimeters is acceptable. You can visit on the web MS POTA Mississippi Parks on the Air, Jackson County Amateur Radio Association for additional information. And finally, beginning Saturday, April 12th at 8 a.m. Central Daylight Time through Sunday, April 13th, 7:59 p.m. Central Daylight Time, the Lake Area Amateur Radio Club in Colony, Texas will activate Texas State Parks in honor of member Tom King, WK5DX, who is now a silent key. For rules and frequencies, go to TX State Parks on the Air-About.
The Great Falls Masonic Amateur Radio Club, Kilo 7, Mike Romeo, in Great Falls, Montana, received a grant from the ARRL Foundation to purchase 5 library book kits to give to local and rural libraries in Montana. The library book contains 11 books dealing with amateur radio and testing guides for all 3 licensed classes. 2 kits were given to the Great Falls Public Library for their shelves and bookmobile. 1 kit each was given to the Wedsworth Memorial Library, the Fairfield Public Library, and the Arden G. Hill Memorial Library within the Malmstrom Air Force Base. All the libraries lacked information about amateur radio, and providing the books will allow patrons throughout Montana access to the information. With many libraries in Montana being rural, it is another way to reach more patrons, inspire a small community about becoming licensed to help with emergency communications within their community, or even help a farmer or rancher while out in the fields tending to crops or cattle touch base with their home station or contact emergency services. The ARRL library book kits will provide information and start them on their journey to becoming licensed amateur radio operators. The book kits are also available at ARRL Library Book Set, www.arrl.org/library-book-set.
Saying farewell is hard, and in the case of the Voyager 1 and 2 spacecraft, doubly so, seeing as how they have been with us for more than 47 years. From the highs of the 1970s and 1980s during their primary mission in our solar system to their journey into the unknown of deep space, every bit of information which their instruments record and send back is something unique that we could not obtain any other way. Yet with the shutting down of 2 more instruments, both spacecraft are now getting awfully close to the end of their extended missions. Last February 25th, the cosmic ray system in Voyager 1 was disabled, with the low-energy charged particle instrument on Voyager 2 to follow on March 24th. With each spacecraft losing about 4 watts of available power per year from their RTGs, the next few instruments to be turned off are already known. Voyager 1's LECF will be turned off next year, with that same year Voyager 2's CRS also getting disabled. This would leave both spacecraft with only their magnetometer and plasma wave subsystem. These provide data on the local magnetic field and electron density, respectively, with at least one of these instruments on each spacecraft likely to remain active until the end of this decade, possibly into the next. With some luck, both spacecraft will see their 50th birthday before humanity's only presence in deep space falls silent.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at www.twiar.net.
The 73rd long-duration expedition to the International Space Station will begin with the departure of the Soyuz MS-26, expected to take place in April 2025. The Expedition 73 crew will consist of astronauts and cosmonauts just launched to the station aboard the SpaceX Crew Dragon Endurance, as well as those soon to follow aboard the Soyuz MS-27. The crew of MS-26 Russian cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin and Ivan Wagner and American astronaut Don Pettit, KD-5 are already making preparations for departure in the coming weeks. Scheduled for departure even sooner, probably in the coming week, is SpaceX Crew Dragon Freedom with two members of SpaceX Crew 9, astronaut Nikki Hague, KG-5 and cosmonaut Alexei Korbunov, accompanied by U.S. astronauts Barry Wilmore and Sunita Williams, KD-5 PLB. Wilmore and Williams were launched to the ISS in June of last year aboard the Boeing Starliner crew flight test. SpaceX Crew 10 consists of NASA astronaut Anne McClain, who will serve as Crew 10's commander. She is joined by Crew 10's pilot, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, KG-5 GWI. Mission specialist, Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takeya Onoshi, K5 LKS, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. Crew 10 was launched from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on Friday, March 14th at 23:03 UTC after a scrub on Wednesday. The March 12th launch attempt was scrubbed due to an issue with the hydraulics on ground support systems on the launch pad. That crew will be joined later next month by the crew of Soyuz MS-27, which is scheduled to consist of cosmonaut Sergei Rizikov and Alexei Zurbitsky, as well as American astronaut Johnny Kim. Once the MS-26 crew departs, Takeya Oneshi of Japan will serve as the commander of Expedition 73, the third Japanese astronaut to take command of the station. Born in Narimi, Japan, Oneshi earned an aeronautical and space engineering degree from the University of Tokyo and was co-pilot of Boeing 767 airplanes from 2003 to 2009. Oneshi will fly to space for the second time on Crew 10, having previously flown to the ISS aboard Soyuz MS-01 in 2016 as part of an Expedition 48 and 49 crew. JAXA and NASA selected Oneshi for NASA's 20th astronaut group in 2009. Expedition 73 will continue the extensive scientific research conducted aboard the ISS, focusing on various fields including biology, human physiology, physics, and material science. The crew members will also maintain and upgrade the space station systems.
A new mobile operations center has just become available in New Zealand to be deployed for emergency communications when disaster strikes. The new mobile emergency operations center of the Manawatu District Council was years in the making. Recently unveiled to the public at Family Fun Day in Victoria Park, Fielding, the EOC was a concept in administrators' minds for quite some time. They recognized for a long time that a transportable EOC was essential for civil defense emergencies in a region that has a large rural population. Until now, the district's urban-based EOC was all everyone had. The mobile EOC can be trailered from place to place and set up quickly, usually within an hour. Once in place, it can accommodate as many as 40 people and shield them well from winds up to 100 kilometers per hour, or about 62 miles an hour. When discussions began years ago, Cyclone Gabriel was on people's minds. Hawke's Bay, which is also on the North Island, suffered terribly during the 2023 storm, but mobile coordination centers responded quickly there, creating a tent city for communications and other assistance. The NZNet newsletter quoted Mayor Helen Warboys, who praised the new EOC and the promise it brings in time of crisis. She said, in times of emergency, every second counts, and having a mobile, highly equipped response unit like this will make a tremendous difference in our ability to coordinate effectively and deploy resources quickly. As the newsletter editors also noted in their report, the new mobile EOC will be ideal for next year's field day operations.
After delaying the launch of the mission 7 times, it was originally slated to take to the skies on February 27th. A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket finally carried the 13th rideshare to orbit on Saturday, March 15th. The launch carried 74 small satellites to synchronous orbit, lifting off from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California at 0643 UTC, or 11:43 p.m. on March 14th local Pacific Coast time. Among the satellites aboard is Haiti's ICM 1.5 Pocket Cube satellite, and its main mission is to act as an FM voice repeater. It can also repeat FSK-derived modes like FT4 and FT8. It has the same functionalities as in the Haiti's RSO-124. FM and digital modes on an uplink of 145.875 MHz and downlink on 436.666 MHz. It also carries the same experiment for Smart IR, Manchester University's test. The repeater will not be active until all the checks have been performed on the satellite. This can take several weeks. A group of satellites labeled as Tevel 2 are on the launch manifest for the SpaceX Transporter 13 mission. Designated as Tevel 2-1 through Tevel 2-9, they are all listed as having a downlink frequency of 436.4 MHz and are expected to be activated in rotation, much in the same way as the previous constellation of Tevel satellites, which have now all decayed from orbit. A French CubeSat named UVS-QSat-NG, or Next Generation, is also on the launch manifest. This satellite appears to have capabilities for amateur operation. However, no such operation has been coordinated or announced.
The adventure promises to be twice as big for young amateurs participating in the Dave Calter Memorial Youth DX Adventure. The experience will happen in June and July of this year. There are 2 trips planned. The first trip takes a group of youngsters to one of the top contesting stations here in the U.S. The young hams will serve as a team operating a special event station W3Y from June 13 through the 15th, hosted by the K3LR Multi contest station in Pennsylvania. In July, other young participants will be going to Curaçao to another super contesting station to operate as PJ2Y. The program was being hosted for the 4th time by the Caribbean Contesting Consortium, PJ2T. This 4-day activation will take place from the 17th through the 22nd of July. Be on the lookout for applications for both of these trips. In the meantime, you can visit the team page to get more information. The website is youthdxa.org. That's YOUTHDXA, all one word, .org. These adventures reflect the spirit and support given to the program by Dave Calter, KB8OCP, the Youth Adventures co-founder. Dave became a silent key in November of 2013.
The call sign of Walter Carlington, VP9KD, could be heard often at the family home in Bermuda when his son Scott was growing up. Walter, who became licensed in March of 1978, became devoted early on to operating in CW, but soon added the joys of SSB to his repertoire. Walter became a silent key at home on March 11th. According to his son, he had been diagnosed with cancer. The retired mechanical engineer belonged to the Radio Society of Bermuda, the International Sideband Society, and the OMIC Amateur Radio Association, where his fist and his voice were well known on a number of the group's nets. He had also been net director for the friendly Caribus Connection net on 2 meters. Walter was 81.
GOTA, or Grids on the Air Activity and Awards Program, will offer new challenges to HF enthusiasts. Since March 1st, 2025, a fortnight or so back, this initiative, endorsed by various major ham radio organizations, has been running as a challenge to shortwave operators at any level of skills and equipment to engage in the ultimate DX art of grid hunting. Grid hunting consists of chasing grid squares of the worldwide Maidenhead locator system, much like VHF and SHF enthusiasts have been doing for years. The difference with the new Grids on the Air program is its focus on promoting activity on HF bands and on phone and CW, as a similar program is already available for digital modes. GOTA aims to give ham operators, both experienced and possibly jaded, as well as newcomers and shortwave listeners, a reason to engage in satisfying hunting activity involving QSOs with stations from all worldwide squares, near or far, important or not.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
NASA's SPHEREx and Punch missions were launched together on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket that lifted off from Vandenberg Space Force Base, California on Tuesday evening, March 11th. The launch had been delayed one day due to unfavorable weather at the launch site and an issue with one of the spacecraft. SPHEREx, the spectrophotometer for the history of the universe, Epoch of Reionization, and ISIS Explorer, will then collect data on more than 450 million galaxies, along with more than 100 million stars in the Milky Way, in order to explore the origins of the universe, contributing to NASA science's key goals to discover the secrets of the universe and search for life elsewhere. The mission's 3D all-sky map will help scientists answer big-picture questions about the universe. The mission will investigate a cosmic phenomenon called inflation that caused the universe to expand rapidly for a fraction of a second after the Big Bang, measure the collective glow created by galaxies near and far, including hidden galaxies that have not yet been individually observed, and search the Milky Way galaxy for hidden reservoirs of water, carbon dioxide, and other essential ingredients for life. The SPHEREx mission's ability to scan large sections of the sky quickly and gather data on millions of objects complements the work of more targeted telescopes like NASA's Hubble and James Webb, and the observatory's data will be freely available to scientists around the world, providing a new encyclopedia of information about hundreds of millions of cosmic objects. Along for the ride was a second mission called Punch, or the polarimeter to unify the corona and heliosphere, a mission consisting of 4 satellites operating in concert. These small sats will observe the sun's corona as it transitions into the solar wind, supporting NASA science's key goals by creating a broad awareness and understanding of how the sun creates conditions that influence Earth and space, which is increasingly part of the human domain. By providing scientists with new information about how these potentially disruptive solar events form and evolve, data from Punch could lead to more accurate prediction about the arrival and impact of such events on Earth and for humanity's robotic explorers in space. Following orbital adjustments and commissioning, each of these 2 missions is planned to last for at least 2 years, contributing valuable data to the study of the universe and the sun's influence on space weather.
And finally this week, members of the Narwhal Amateur Radio Society are marking the 70th anniversary of the approval of the vaccine against polio, which was developed by the American physician and researcher Dr. Jonas Salk. On April 12, 1955, the U.S. government permitted the use of Salk's injectable vaccine, which contains inactive forms of the virus. At the time, there had been several epidemics of polio, a paralyzing virus also known as poliomyelitis. Radio operators in a number of locations around the U.S. will be calling QRZ Salk or polio on the air from April 5th through April 19th. And to ensure that everyone has a chance to make contact with the special event stations, they will be operating on HF, VHF, and UHF. Operators will be using SSB, FT4, FT8, Echolink, and All-Star. The hams will be using call signs that spell out the word polio, so listen for W7P, W7O, W7L, W7I, and again W7O. Each station will be sending out individual QSL cards, so there's an opportunity to collect all 5. The Narwhal operators are also looking for volunteer operators. Anyone who wants to participate or has questions about the event should send an email to nars@narwhal.be.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77 @gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on the internet, on low-power FM stations, and on great repeater systems like the WB3GXW repeater on 147.225 MHz in Silver Springs, Maryland, serving all of Silver Springs and also covering the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. WB3GXW can also be found on Echolink Conference Server Node 6154. If you are a This Week in Amateur Radio affiliate and you would like us to give a free on-air announcement of your station's carriage of the program, please send us an email with the station location, call sign, coverage area, and day and time you air This Week in Amateur Radio, plus any other information you would like us to impart. You can send to the following email, w2xbs77@gmail.com. That address once again is w2xbs77@gmail.com. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you would like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and all our news team around the world, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, wishing you 73.